To talk about more is like a dil ki baat, stuff which I feel a little strongly about, not necessarily completely structured, but I think things which are important, especially for the younger bunch. And I was asked to cover in terms of fellowships. There's some stuff I will talk about there. Research, which I think is something we are very much lacking in, and need to work up. Academics, especially for those of us who are in private practice, and what you do in clinics or clinical practice. So fellowships, today I think the likes of our seniors, they are generalists. Today more and more we are tending to get into certain areas and not do everything. So to get that amount of exposure, to get that amount of confidence, certainly you need fellowships where there is volume. And even those of us who want to do mainly trauma, even trauma is actually becoming a specialty today with the kind of trauma that is occurring now, which we didn't used to see when we were training. Which kind of fellowship should we be looking for? I think the importance here is to become a specialist in a region rather than a specialist in a procedure. I've stood on the stage with a well-known arthroplasty surgeon and who says that, I know nothing about high tibial osteotomy, so I don't do it. I think that is not the right way to go. If you are doing a particular region, you should know much about that particular region and not just be a surgical sort of technician. There is a talk I noticed later today about interdisciplinary stuff, and many of the good orthopedic surgeons, especially in America, where it's easy to move from one sort of specialization like engineering into another, they've brought all their knowledge of engineering into orthopedic surgery. So even today when I am talking of, say, I'm teaching Ilizarov principles or whatever I've learned about Ilizarov, a lot of that is useful for me when I do arthroplasty. So this cross-fertilization is important. Should we be doing it after MS, which is the current trend? I don't think an orthopedic surgeon after his MS is mature enough to even really make that decision as a general rule. There may be exceptions. And I think having a good general orthopedic experience is important, because even say when you're doing arthroplasty, you're going to see fractures. There is always something of this happening in the other side. And it's good to have a good amount of general orthopedic experience for a couple of years, because ultimately all surgeons will peak not very early. Surgeons really start peaking 40, 45. And you have to train yourself to be the Lambe race ka ghoda. It's not a matter of getting out of MS and then starting work immediately and making lots of money. I think once you're well trained, then automatically work does happen. Many of us, when we've trained in particular techniques, we trained abroad. I think today most cities in Mumbai, in India, will have adequate experience or adequate volume and high quality work in things like spine, arthroplasty, trauma, and therefore it's not absolutely necessary to go abroad for fellowship. And as most of us who have been abroad will be able to sort of vouch for the fact that in the West also shit happens. It's not that only we do crap. And Gora also jhoot bolta hai. It's not that only we talk about it. So you have to look at the quality of education that you are getting. Yes, if you want something under your name, in terms of on your visiting card, that's fine. But if you want really something to learn, then you have to do a fellowship, and a fellowship takes time. These 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, which become fellowships on the visiting card, really are of no help in your own personal development. Research is important from the point of view of, to me at least, primarily as an audit and as a self-improvement. Am I doing things well? Are things happening the way that I want them to happen? If I have treated 10 non-unions, have all of them healed? The ones that didn't heal, why they didn't heal? So as a part of a regular sort of self-improvement program, we lack as students, I know as a consultant today, I lack a very strong research culture. You put me in any surgical situation, I can find my way out of it. But in terms of research, no. And why is that? Because we did not inculcate that culture. All the work that we did was clinical. And it's time, especially for the younger guys, to kind of bring this as part of your work. Because if you have not written it down, if you have not published it, there are n number of people who will go with this. I have done 25,000 cases of this and 5,000 cases of that. The strength with which you can sort of argue that, you know, my 20 cases of XYZ are published and this is what we found. It deflates a lot of these empty claims, apart from the fact that it helps us to improve. What do we research? We don't really have the facilities for some earth-shattering basic research, but certainly the simplest stuff, taking a single question, we can look at answering it. For example, one of the things that I am looking at now, very simple. When we do a high-level osteotomy with the way that I do it with a fixator, is the posterior slope changed or not? Right? I think that's important because opening wedge shows you increase the slope, closing wedge shows you reduce. If I can show that with this, the slope doesn't change, which is what I believe, that is a small point or a small step kind of ahead. And even if you don't have large volume, which in private practice you may not, but you can certainly, you know, publish case reports, case series of some interesting stuff. And I think this should start from the level of post-graduation. Just like postgraduates, by working in a sort of relatively harsh environment of working hard, pick up a lot of things. Publishing research also should happen in that. Old horses like me also have to learn new tricks, but that is difficult now. If you do this from post-graduation or from a younger age, I think it is certainly better. And now we have quite a lot of people who are actively sort of propagating this research agenda, and I think that's a good thing. I found teaching to be my most important way of learning. When I have to stand on a stage and talk or teach the Elizarov method or whatever it is I'm talking about to 30, 50 people who are otherwise supposed to be the cream of medicine, I can't sit and bullshit them. So I have to have my stuff very clear. I have to have my understanding very clear to be able to teach something. So I think that is, for me, self-help also, and it's a way of sharing whatever it is that we know. And today, I think even in the private sector, this is happening because traditional models of teaching are completely going down the drain. The guys who are supposed to be teachers take salaries for teaching and service. Unfortunately, that is not happening in a lot of places. And if you look at most of the successful people, they will be good teachers also. I think most of the people who are doing good work take that time to teach and spread their message. And as I said, there's more and more quality teaching now happening in the private sector. You cannot divest the teaching part from your practice. Now, as far as the clinical part goes, the one thing that I can say with personal experience is money, fame, etc. is something which can come, can go away very easily. Your own reputation is something which nobody else can snatch from you. You are the only person who can put your reputation down the drain. And being ethical and being successful, these are not two mutually exclusive things. Today, there's so much talk about the problems with medicine. And all of us are very gung-ho about defending ourselves. Oh, we do good. Of course we do good work, but we do wrong stuff also. Which of us can't afford a good meal? We don't need pharma companies to pay. If we go and we go for a conference, we will go in a 3-star. And when a pharma company takes us, it has to be a 5-star. I think nobody kind of says this to ourselves because we are scared that, okay, we will be taken as, or it'll get out into the public. But it is true. Gut practice is true. You can justify it all you want, that, oh, the whole world is doing it, etc., etc., etc. But then, you can justify almost anything if by that way of justification. So, ethical practice is a symposium in itself. You can spend half a day talking of ethical practice. But I think that is something which is very much doable, and you will see, if you look around, you will see very many examples of ethical practice, and I think those are the ones to be followed. Today, doing research in a private practice setup is not difficult with things like your ability to take pictures, your ability to scan stuff. There are enough gadgets around which you can use to keep a record. You may not start writing today, but whatever you are doing, if you keep a record of them, that is not difficult at all. But I think the two things which are important are the creation of some kind of a team. And these teams would be your own peers, where you're talking of not specifically group practice, but people who gel together well in terms of doing research, and also subordinates. Because you yourself as the individual star performer, the days of K.T. Dholakia, I think, basically are gone. There's no more single star, who's the best surgeon in the city. Never going to happen. And the more we build up our team or our subordinates, the more we are free to sort of sharpen the axe, because you have to do your work and you have to keep up to date with simple things like when we got out of medical college, V nails and K nails was what was. So we learnt interlock nailing, which today's resident is staple. We learnt it on the job. So this is a area where we are never going to stop learning. And I think mixing up all of this is the key to maintaining yourself in terms of the cutting edge. Thank you.